3 days after my grandmother's death, the doorbell rang at dawn. I stumbled through our Victorian house in bare feet, my grief still fresh as morning dew on the roses Grandma Rose had planted beneath my bedroom window. The persistent chiming echoed through empty hallways that still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume, a scent that clung to everything she'd touched during her final weeks with us. My father had already left for his morning jog, a religious ritual he'd maintained for as long as I could remember. Mom was upstairs, probably staring at herself in the bathroom mirror, trying to convince herself she was strong enough to face another day of funeral preparations and condolence calls. That left me, Addison Claire Morrison, 23 years old, and drowning in a sorrow that felt too vast for my small frame. At the door, there was no delivery truck, no person waiting with condolences, just a weathered cardboard box sitting on our welcome mat, my name written across the top in spidery handwriting that made my breath catch. I recognized those careful cursive letters immediately. They belonged to Grandma Rose. My hands trembled as I carried the box inside, setting it on the kitchen table where she used to sit every morning, reading her newspaper and humming old jazz standards. The box was heavier than expected, and when I lifted the flaps, tissue paper rustled like whispered secrets. Nestled inside was an ancient tape recorder, the kind with actual cassette tapes that belonged in a museum. A yellow post-it note was attached to the top. Press play immediately. Trust no one else with this. Rose. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pressed the worn plastic button. The tape hissed to life, and then her voice filled the kitchen. Not the frail whisper of her final days, but the strong, clear tone I remembered from childhood bedtime stories. "My dearest Addison," she began, and I had to grip the table's edge to steady myself. "If you're hearing this, then I'm gone, and it's time you knew the truth about your father. Thomas Morrison is not who you think he is. His real name is Victor Kozlov, and everything you've believed about your family is a lie." The words hit me like physical blows. My father, steady, reliable Thomas Morrison who coached Little League and grilled burgers every 4th of July, was someone else entirely? The recording continued, but the blood rushing through my ears made it hard to focus. "Your father came to us 24 years ago with a new identity, and a past he could never speak about. We took him in because your mother was already pregnant with you, and because sometimes good people make terrible choices in impossible situations. But Addison, there are others who haven't forgotten who he really is, and I fear my death may not have been as natural as it appeared." The tape clicked off, leaving me in suffocating silence. My grandmother had died of a heart attack in her sleep. Peaceful, the doctor said. Natural causes. But now her voice from beyond the grave was suggesting something far more sinister. My phone vibrated against the table, making me jump. An unknown number had sent a text. "Don't tell anyone that you know this. Your life depends on your silence. I'll contact you soon. A friend." I stared at the message until the words blurred together. My father's morning jog would bring him home in 30 minutes. My mother would be downstairs soon, expecting me to help address more sympathy cards. The funeral was in 2 days, and suddenly I felt like I was planning a memorial for someone I'd never really known. But the woman on that recording, my grandmother who had baked cookies and taught me to knit, and held me through every nightmare. She had risked everything to tell me this truth. She had known she was dying, had planned this moment, had trusted me with a secret that could apparently cost me my life. I rewound the tape and played it again, memorizing every word, every pause, every tremor in her beloved voice. Victor Kozlov. The name tasted foreign on my tongue, but as I repeated it, I began to see my father differently. The way he sometimes flinched at unexpected sounds, how he never talked about his childhood, the fact that we had no relatives on his side of the family. Outside, I heard the familiar sound of running shoes on our front path. Dad was home early. I grabbed the recorder, shoved it back into the box, and ran upstairs to my room. As I hid everything under my bed, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Downstairs, the front door opened, and I heard my father call out his usual greeting. "Morning, sunshine. Beautiful day, isn't it?" But now his voice carried an accent I'd never noticed before. Subtle, but definitely there. Eastern European, maybe Russian, and for the first time in my life, the sound of my father coming home didn't make me feel safe. It made me feel like prey. I couldn't eat breakfast. Every bite of toast turned to sawdust in my mouth while I watched my father, Victor, butter his English muffin with the same methodical precision he'd shown every morning of my life. He caught me staring and smiled that warm, familiar smile that now seemed like a mask. "You look pale, sweetheart. Grief hits everyone differently." His voice carried that new accent I couldn't unhear, rolling the R in everyone just slightly. "Maybe you should stay home from work today." "I'm fine, Dad." The word felt strange now, loaded with questions I couldn't ask. I pushed away from the table. "I need some air." I drove aimlessly through town, my grandmother's voice echoing in my head. Viktor Kozlov. I pulled into the parking lot of our small library and sat in my car, Googling the name on my phone. The results made my blood run cold. Viktor Kozlov had been a mid-level bureaucrat in the Soviet Union, who disappeared in 1999, right around the time my father claimed to have moved to our small Ohio town. There were scattered references to financial crimes, political asylum, and a manhunt that had gone cold. But the photographs were too grainy and outdated to confirm anything. I switched to searching for Thomas Morrison and found exactly what I expected, a perfectly crafted identity that began 24 years ago. High school records that led nowhere, a birth certificate from a hospital that had burned down, employment history at companies that no longer existed. My phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. Library parking lot isn't safe. Coffee shop on Main Street. 1 hour. Come alone. I looked around frantically. The parking lot was nearly empty. Just me, an elderly man reading a newspaper in a blue sedan, and a woman walking her dog. But someone was watching me. Someone knew exactly where I was and what I was doing. The coffee shop was crowded enough to feel safe but quiet enough for conversation. I ordered a latte I didn't want, and chose a corner table where I could see all the entrances. 30 minutes passed, then 45. I was beginning to think this was all some cruel joke, when a woman in her 50s approached my table. Addison. She had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, but her hands shook as she sat down across from me. I'm Sarah. I worked with your grandmother at the hospital, back when she was still nursing. I knew the name. Grandma Rose had mentioned Sarah countless times. They'd been close friends for decades. You sent the messages? Sarah nodded, glancing nervously around the coffee shop. Rose came to me 3 months ago. She was scared, said she'd been getting strange phone calls. Men with accents asking about Thomas, wanting to know where he worked, what his routine was. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She thought someone had found him. Found who? Viktor Kozlov? Sarah's face went white. She told you everything. Not everything. Just that my father isn't who I think he is. I leaned forward, desperate for answers. Sarah, please. What did my grandmother know? 24 years ago, your father appeared in this town like a ghost. No past, no family, no real history. But he had money. Enough to buy a house, start a business, create a whole new life. Rose was working emergency intake when they brought your mother in, unconscious from a drug overdose. My world tilted. What? She's never done drugs. Someone had drugged her, Addison, at a bar, maybe a party. She was 19, unconscious, and pregnant. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Your father brought her in, said he was her boyfriend, that he'd take care of everything. Rose always wondered how a complete stranger could be so concerned about a girl he barely knew. The pieces were shifting, forming a picture I didn't want to see. He saved her life, or he was responsible for what happened to her. Sarah reached across the table and gripped my hand. Rose never trusted him completely. She watched, she waited, and she documented everything. 3 months ago, she told me she'd seen a man following your father home from work. The same man who'd been asking questions. What happened to him? The man who was following Dad. Sarah's grip tightened. He disappeared. And a week later, your grandmother had her first heart attack, the minor one that put her in the hospital. She told me it wasn't a heart attack, Addison. She said someone had poisoned her. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm. I pulled my hand away from Sarah's. That's impossible. The doctors said what they were trained to see. But Rose knew her own body. She knew what heart problems felt like because she'd treated thousands of patients with cardiac issues. Sarah leaned back, studying my face. After that first incident, she started making recordings. Insurance policies, she called them. Evidence in case something happened to her. There are more recordings? I don't know. She gave me a key to a safety deposit box and told me to give it to you if anything happened to her. But Addison, Sarah stood up, clearly agitated. There are people looking for your father. Dangerous people who won't hesitate to hurt you or your mother to get to him. She pressed a small brass key into my palm. Box 247 at First National Bank. Whatever Rose left you there, be careful with it. And whatever you do, don't let Thomas know you have it. I stared at the key. Why are you helping me? Because Rose was my best friend for 30 years. And because she believed you deserved to know the truth. Sarah gathered her purse and coat. Be careful, Addison. Your father may not be the man you grew up with, but the people hunting him are far worse. She walked away, leaving me alone with a key that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Outside, the late afternoon sun was setting, painting the coffee shop windows gold. But all I could think about was my mother, 19 and unconscious, and a stranger who had claimed to love her. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you, sunshine. For the first time in my life, those words felt like a threat. I found my mother in Grandma Rose's old room, sitting on the stripped mattress, holding a photograph I'd never seen before. The room still smelled like lavender and old books, but now it felt haunted by secrets. "Mom?" I hesitated in the doorway, the bank key heavy in my pocket. "What are you looking at?" She startled, quickly shoving the photo into her sweater pocket. "Oh, honey, I didn't hear you come in." Her smile was too bright, too forced. "I was just remembering. Can I see the picture?" Her hand moved protectively over her pocket. "It's nothing important, just old memories." I'd been rehearsing this conversation during the drive home, but now, faced with my mother's fragile state, the words felt like weapons. "Mom, I need to ask you something about Dad." Elizabeth Morrison, the woman who had raised me, who had braided my hair and kissed my scraped knees, suddenly looked like a stranger. Her blue eyes, usually so warm and open, became guarded. "What about your father? When you two met, how well did you know him?" She stood abruptly, smoothing down her skirt with shaking hands. "Addison, this isn't the time for family history. We have a funeral to plan. Guests coming tomorrow." "Mom, please." I stepped into the room, closing the door behind me. "I know something's wrong. I know Dad isn't who he says he is." The color drained from her face. For a moment, I thought she might collapse. Then she sat back down on the bed, her shoulders sagging like a marionette with cut strings. "How much do you know?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "That his real name is Viktor Kozlov, that he's been hiding from something for 24 years. I sat beside her on the bed. "Mom, what happened when you met him?" She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. Then she pulled the photograph from her pocket and handed it to me. It showed a much younger version of my mother standing beside a man I'd never seen before. Dark hair, kind eyes, wearing a college sweatshirt. "This is David," she said softly. "My boyfriend from college. We were supposed to get married after graduation. What happened to him? He died in a car accident 3 weeks before you were born." Tears started flowing down her cheeks. I was 19, pregnant, and completely alone. My parents had disowned me for getting pregnant, and David's family blamed me for their son's death. I studied the photograph. David looked nothing like my father. "Mom, whose baby was I?" "David's. You were David's daughter." She took the photo back, tracing his face with one finger. "But after he died, I fell apart. I started drinking, taking pills, anything to numb the pain. I don't remember much from those last few weeks of my pregnancy. The pieces Sarah had given me began falling into place. Someone drugged you." She looked up sharply. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I'm starting to understand what really happened." I took her hands in mine. "Mom, the night you ended up in the emergency room, do you remember anything about it?" "I remember going to a bar near campus. I remember feeling dizzy, sick, then nothing until I woke up in the hospital." Her voice grew smaller with each word. "Thomas was there when I woke up. He said he'd found me collapsed outside the bar, that he'd brought me to the hospital." "And you believed him?" "I was grateful to him. He stayed with me through your birth, helped me when the hospital bills came due, gave us a place to live when I had nowhere else to go." She stood up and walked to the window. "He saved us, Addison. Or he destroyed your life first so he could rebuild it the way he wanted." She spun around, anger flashing in her eyes. "Don't you dare. Whatever else your father has done, he loves us. He has been nothing but devoted to this family for 23 years. But why, Mom? Why would a complete stranger take on a pregnant teenager and her baby? What did he get out of it?" The question hung in the air between us. I could see her working through the logic, the same questions I'd been asking myself all day. "A perfect cover," she whispered. "A family, a reason to stay in one place, to blend in, to become invisible." I pulled out my phone and showed her the search results I'd found about Viktor Kozlov. She read in silence, her face growing paler with each line. "Political asylum," she read aloud. "Financial crimes. Suspected ties to organized crime." She handed the phone back to me. "This doesn't prove anything. Anyone can put information on the internet." "Mom, Grandma Rose left me a recording. She knew who Dad really was, and she thought someone might have killed her to keep her quiet." The words hit her like a physical blow. She staggered backward, catching herself against the dresser. "That's impossible. Rose died of a heart attack." "Did she? Or did she die because she knew too much about Viktor Kozlov?" My mother's breathing became rapid and shallow. I won't believe that Thomas would hurt Rose. She was like a mother to him. Maybe that's exactly why he had to stop her." Before she could respond, we heard the front door slam shut downstairs. Dad's voice echoed through the house. "I'm home. Where are my girls?" My mother grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Not a word, Addison. Promise me you won't say anything to him about this." "Mom, promise me." Her voice was desperate, terrified. If you're right about any of this, then talking to him could get us both killed. I looked into her eyes and saw the same fear that had been growing in my chest all day. My mother knew something was wrong. She'd always known. "I promise," I whispered. But as we heard his footsteps on the stairs, I slipped my hand into my pocket and gripped the key to Grandma Rose's safety deposit box. Whatever secrets my grandmother had hidden there, I was going to find them, even if they destroyed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and the man who had raised me. The bank opened at 9 a.m. sharp, and I was waiting in the parking lot at 8:30, watching early morning commuters grab coffee from the drive-thru next door. My hands hadn't stopped shaking since yesterday's conversation with Mom. She'd spent the evening pretending everything was normal, helping Dad address more sympathy cards while I watched them both with new eyes. The way she flinched when he touched her shoulder, the way he studied her face when he thought she wasn't looking. 24 years of marriage, and they were both performing roles in a play I was just beginning to understand. Inside the bank, I presented the key to a young teller who led me to a small, sterile room lined with safety deposit boxes. Box 247 was larger than I'd expected, and when I lifted the metal lid, my breath caught. Dozens of photographs spilled across the table. My father, Thomas, Victor, whoever he was, in various locations around town, but clearly unaware he was being photographed. Getting coffee, leaving his office, jogging through the park. Someone had been conducting surveillance on him for months. Beneath the photos were 3 more cassette tapes labeled with dates from the past 6 months, a thick manila envelope marked insurance, and a letter addressed to me in my grandmother's careful handwriting. I opened the letter first. My dearest Addison, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. I pray I'm wrong about Thomas, but I fear I've lived with a dangerous man for over 2 decades. The photographs were taken by a private investigator I hired 3 months ago. His name was Marcus Webb, and he disappeared after taking these pictures. The police say he left town voluntarily, but Marcus had been in this business for 15 years. He wouldn't have abandoned a paying client. The tapes contain conversations I recorded in our house when Thomas thought I was sleeping. He makes phone calls late at night, speaking in Russian to people who frighten me. He's arranging something, Addison. Something that involves leaving town quickly. In the envelope, you'll find copies of documents I discovered hidden in his office. Birth certificates for 3 different identities, passport photos, and bank account numbers in the Cayman Islands. There's also a list of names I believe are his associates from his past life. I know you love the man who raised you, but that man may not exist. The real Viktor Kozlov is someone else entirely, and I fear what he might do to protect his secrets. Trust no one, not even your mother. I believe she knows more than she's admitted. All my love, Grandma Rose. P.S. If something happens to you, I've mailed copies of everything to my lawyer, David Chen, with instructions to contact the FBI if both you and I die under suspicious circumstances. My hands trembled as I opened the manila envelope. Inside were photocopies of documents that made my blood run cold. Birth certificates for Thomas Morrison, Michael Thompson, and Alexander Petrov. Passport photos showing my father with different hair, different clothing, but unmistakably him. Bank statements showing regular deposits of large amounts of money with no clear source. But it was the list of names that made me understand the true danger we were in. Written in my grandmother's neat handwriting were 8 names with notations beside them. Dmitry Volkov, murdered 2018, Anya Sokolova, disappeared 2019, Mikhail Petrov, car accident 2020, Viktor Kozlov, alive, hiding in Ohio, Sergei Popov, heart attack, 2021, Natasha Romanov, suicide, 2022, Pavel Morozov, house fire 2023, Elena Kozlova, 7 people dead, 1 missing, and my father was the only one still alive. I loaded the first tape into a portable player I'd brought from home. My grandmother's voice filled the small bank room. March 15th, 2:30 a.m. Thomas is on the phone again. I can hear him through the heating vent in my room. Then, muffled but audible, my father's voice speaking rapid Russian. I didn't understand the words, but the tone was urgent, almost desperate. He's arguing with someone, Grandma Rose continued. This is the 3rd call this week. He keeps saying a name, Elena. I looked it up online. Elena Kozlova was found dead in her apartment in Chicago last month. The police ruled it suicide, but Thomas seems to think otherwise. The recording continued with more fragments of conversation, my father's voice becoming increasingly agitated. On the second tape, dated just 2 weeks before my grandmother's death, his tone had changed to something that chilled me to the bone. "They're getting closer," he said in English to whoever he was speaking with. "The old woman knows too much. She's been asking questions, taking pictures. We need to handle this before it becomes a problem. I ejected the tape with shaking hands. My father, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had never missed a school play, who brought me soup when I was sick, was discussing my grandmother as a problem to be handled. My phone buzzed. Sarah's number. Meet me at the cemetery. Rose's grave. Come alone and bring everything you found. The cemetery was a 10-minute drive from the bank. I found Sarah kneeling beside my grandmother's fresh grave, placing white roses on the dark soil. She looked up as I approached, and I could see she'd been crying. You found it all, didn't you? She asked. I nodded, unable to speak. She stood and brushed dirt from her knees. Rose called me the night before she died. She said she'd seen Thomas going through her room looking for something. She was scared, Addison, genuinely terrified of the man she'd lived with for 24 years. Did she tell you what she found in his office? Some of it. Enough to know that your father has been living under an assumed identity, and that people from his past life have been dying systematically for the past 5 years. Sarah looked around the cemetery nervously. She also told me something else. Something she made me promise to tell you only if something happened to her. What? Your biological father, David, didn't die in a car accident. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. Rose had a friend who worked at the hospital where they brought his body. There were signs of foul play that were covered up. David was murdered, Addison, and Rose believed Thomas killed him to get access to your pregnant mother. The world tilted around me. I gripped Sarah's arm to keep from falling. That's impossible. Dad loved my mom. He saved us. He eliminated his competition and created a family that would give him the perfect cover identity. Rose spent years trying to prove it, but David's death was ruled accidental, and too much time has passed to investigate properly now. I thought about my mother's photo of David, the young man with kind eyes who was supposed to be my father, the man I'd never known because Thomas Morrison, Victor Kozlov, had wanted his life. What am I supposed to do with this information? I asked. Sarah handed me a business card. David Chen, your grandmother's lawyer. She's given him sealed copies of everything you found today, with instructions to contact federal authorities if anything happens to you or your mother. As she walked away, leaving me alone beside my grandmother's grave, I realized that everything I'd believed about my life was built on murder and lies, and the man responsible for it all was waiting for me at home, probably wondering where I'd been all morning. I had a choice to make: confront the monster who'd raised me, or keep playing the role of his loving daughter while I figured out how to escape alive. That evening, I sat in my childhood bedroom, staring at the tapes and documents spread across my desk like pieces of a nightmare puzzle. Every few minutes, I heard Dad moving around downstairs, the creak of his office chair, the soft murmur of another late-night phone call, the familiar sounds of a life I now knew was built on deception. I put on headphones and played the third tape, the one dated just 5 days before Grandma Rose's death. I know you're listening to this somewhere, Rose, my father's voice said clearly, speaking directly into what must have been her hidden recording device. You've been sloppy, old woman. Did you think I wouldn't notice my office being searched? Did you think I couldn't hear you moving around upstairs when I make my calls? My blood turned to ice. He had known she was recording him. I've been patient with you because Elizabeth loves you, and Addison thinks you hung the moon, the recording continued. But my patience has limits. There are people looking for me, people who will hurt my family to get to me. The best way to protect everyone is for certain information to stay buried. The tape clicked off. I rewound it and played it again, my hands shaking. This wasn't a man planning murder. It was a man trying to prevent it. But that didn't explain the list of dead associates, or David's suspicious accident, or the fear in my grandmother's voice. My laptop chimed with a new email from an address I didn't recognize. vkozlov1975@tempmail.com. The subject line read, "For Addison, the truth about your father." I hesitated before opening it, my cursor hovering over the delete button. But I needed answers more than I needed safety. The email contained a single attachment, a video file. When I clicked play, a young woman appeared on screen. She had dark hair, tired eyes, and a haunted expression that reminded me of my own reflection lately. "My name is Elena Kozlova," she said in accented English. "Victor Kozlov is my brother, and if you're watching this, it means I'm probably dead." I paused the video, heart pounding. Elena Kozlova, the woman on Grandma Rose's list, the one marked with question marks. 25 years ago, Victor and I worked for the Russian government in a department that officially didn't exist, Elena continued. We laundered money for oligarchs, arranged false identities for defectors, and eliminated people who became inconvenient to the state. Victor was very good at his job. Too good. She paused, glancing nervously off camera. In 1999, Victor discovered that our handler was stealing from the operation. Instead of reporting it through proper channels, My brother decided to steal everything and disappear. He took files, money, and the identities of several deep-cover agents, including the names of people like me who were hiding all over the world. My father hadn't been running from the Russian government. He'd been running from the people he'd betrayed. For years, they hunted us systematically, Elena said. One by one, everyone who knew about Victor's betrayal was eliminated. I managed to stay hidden for 2 decades, but 6 months ago they found me. Before I die, I want Victor's daughter to know the truth about her father. The video quality shifted, showing what looked like surveillance footage of a small apartment. Elena was visible through a window, talking on a phone. This was filmed 3 days before my death, her voice narrated. I was calling Victor, trying to warn him that they were close. But he told me that his cover was perfect, that his American family made him untouchable. He said he'd rather see me die than risk exposing his new life. The blood drained from my face. On the surveillance footage, Elena suddenly clutched her chest and collapsed. But this wasn't a heart attack or natural death. I could see a small dart protruding from her neck. They used poison. Elena's voice continued over the footage of her own murder. The same method they've used on at least 6 others. It mimics heart failure, leaves no trace in routine autopsies. If you're watching this, Addison, it means they found your father. And it means everyone close to him is now a target. The video switched back to Elena, speaking directly to the camera. Your grandmother was right to be suspicious. The man who raised you is not a loving father who made a mistake. He's a professional killer who chose his own survival over the lives of 8 people who trusted him. He will sacrifice you and your mother without hesitation if it means staying alive. She leaned closer to the camera. There's a USB drive hidden in his office, behind a loose baseboard under his desk. It contains the real files he stole from Russia, bank accounts, government secrets, and the identities of agents still in deep cover around the world. That drive is worth millions to the right buyer, and it's the reason people are still hunting him. The video ended with Elena looking directly into the camera. I'm sorry you had to learn this way, Addison. Your father destroyed so many lives, including your real father's. David was killed because Victor needed a pregnant woman to complete his cover identity, and your mother was the perfect target. Don't let him destroy you, too. I sat in stunned silence, staring at the blank screen. Elena Kozlova had recorded her own murder to expose my father's crimes. She died knowing that her brother, my father, had chosen his American family over her life, but she'd also given me the location of evidence that could end this nightmare. I crept downstairs, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. Dad's office door was closed, but I could see light underneath. He was still awake, probably making more calls to whoever was helping him plan his next disappearance. The office door handle turned silently in my hand. Inside, moonlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the desk where my father paid bills and helped me with homework, and maintained the facade of a normal suburban life. I dropped to my knees beside the desk and felt along the baseboards until I found a section that gave slightly under pressure. The wood panel popped out easily, revealing a small cavity behind it. My fingers closed around a thumb drive. As I pulled it out, the office light suddenly blazed on. Looking for something, Sunshine? I spun around to find my father standing in the doorway, no longer the warm, familiar man who'd raised me. His eyes were cold, calculating, and absolutely terrifying. In his hand was a gun I'd never seen before. I really hoped it wouldn't come to this, he said softly, but I suppose it was inevitable. You always were too curious for your own good. Stand up slowly, Addison. Keep your hands where I can see them. My father's voice was calm, professional. Nothing like the warm tone that had wished me goodnight every day of my life. I rose from behind the desk, the USB drive hidden in my closed fist, my heart hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. I know what you're thinking, he said, stepping into the office and closing the door behind him. This is the moment where the loving father you've known for 23 years disappears, and the monster everyone's been warning you about reveals himself. But it's not that simple, isn't it? I found my voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. I know who you really are, Victor. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe even pride. How much do you know? I know you're not Thomas Morrison. I know you killed my real father and 7 other people to protect your identity. I know Grandma Rose died because she discovered your secrets. The words poured out of me like a dam breaking. And I know you'll kill me too if I threaten your cover. He lowered the gun slightly, his expression growing sad. Addison, everything you just said is both completely true and completely wrong. What does that mean? It means the situation is far more complicated than a dead Russian spy's video message could explain. He moved to his desk chair and sat down, though he kept the gun trained on me. Yes, I am Victor Kozlov. Yes, I have killed people, more than you could imagine. And yes, Your biological father died because of choices I made. The casual admission hit me like a physical blow. You murdered David. I murdered many people, Addison. David was just the first one I felt guilty about. He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Do you want to know why? Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I found myself nodding. Because David wasn't some innocent college student in love with your mother. He was FSB, Russian intelligence, sent to monitor a network of sleeper agents operating in American universities. Victor opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents. Your mother wasn't his girlfriend. She was his assignment. The room seemed to tilt. That's impossible. Elizabeth's parents weren't just conservative Christians who disowned their pregnant daughter. Her father worked for the State Department, had access to classified information about Soviet defectors. David's job was to get close to Elizabeth, gain her trust, and use that relationship to access her father's files. He slid a photograph across the desk. It showed a much younger version of my mother, but she wasn't pregnant. She was standing next to David in what looked like a government building, both of them holding official-looking credentials. She was part of it? I whispered. She was 19, recruited by David and his handlers who told her she'd be helping her country. They convinced her to steal information from her father's office, to report on his activities. She had no idea she was working for Russian intelligence. Victor pulled out another document, a mission report written in Cyrillic. When I discovered David's operation, I had two choices: report it to my superiors, who would have both of you killed to cover their tracks, or handle it myself. So you killed him. I killed him to save your mother's life, and yours. He set down the gun and leaned back in his chair. Elizabeth was pregnant with David's child, but she was also a liability. She knew too much about the operation, even if she didn't understand what she knew. My handlers wanted her eliminated along with David, but you saved her instead. I made the biggest mistake of my life, he said quietly. I fell in love with the idea of the family I could have with her, the normal life I could build using the identity documents I'd stolen. So I staged David's car accident, drugged Elizabeth to make her forget the details of her involvement with Russian intelligence, and convinced her that I was her rescuer rather than her destroyer. The pieces were reshuffling in my mind, creating a picture that was somehow both better and worse than what I'd imagined. Mom doesn't remember any of this. The drugs I used caused selective memory loss. She remembers David as her boyfriend, remembers being pregnant and scared, but not the espionage or the betrayal. As far as she knows, she was an innocent victim I saved from a bad situation. What about Grandma Rose? Victor's expression darkened. Rose suspected something was wrong from the beginning. She was a smart woman, too smart for her own good. 3 months ago, she started investigating my background, and she got uncomfortably close to the truth. Did you kill her? No. His answer was immediate, emphatic. But I know who did. Before I could respond, I heard the front door slam open downstairs. Heavy footsteps echoed through the house, multiple people moving with military precision. Victor was on his feet instantly, grabbing the gun and a go-bag I hadn't noticed behind his desk. They're here, he said. The people I've been hiding from for 24 years have finally found us. Mom is already gone. They took her an hour ago while you were upstairs listening to Elena's recording. Victor moved to the window and peered through the blinds. 3 vehicles, at least 8 men. Professional kill team. The footsteps were on the stairs now, moving toward us with deadly purpose. Addison, listen to me very carefully, Victor said, his voice taking on the tone of a man accustomed to life and death decisions. Everything I told you about loving your mother and wanting a normal life, that was true. But I am also exactly the monster Elena described. I have done terrible things to protect this family, and I will do worse things before this night is over. The door exploded inward in a shower of wood splinters. Men in black tactical gear poured into the room, automatic weapons raised. Victor stepped in front of me, his gun steady despite being outnumbered 8-1. Gentlemen, he said in Russian, I believe you have something that belongs to me. One of the men responded in heavily accented English. We have your wife, Kozlov. Give us the drive and the girl, and perhaps she lives through the night. Victor glanced back at me, his eyes conveying an apology and a promise simultaneously. I'm sorry, Addison. Sorry for all of it, but mostly sorry for what you're about to see. Then he opened fire. The gunfight lasted less than 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. Victor moved like a machine built for violence, rolling, firing, reloading with mechanical precision while men in black gear fell around him. I pressed myself against the wall, horrified and mesmerized by the transformation of the man who'd taught me to ride a bicycle. When the shooting stopped, 6 men were dead or dying on his office floor. 2 had escaped back down the stairs, and Victor was bleeding from a graze on his shoulder. We have maybe 3 minutes before reinforcements arrive, he said, checking his weapon with steady hands. Can you drive? Yes, but no questions. We go out the back, take your car, and get to your mother before they decide she's more valuable dead than alive. He grabbed a laptop and several folders from his desk. The USB drive you found. Give it to me. How did you know? Addison, I've been a spy for longer than you've been alive. I know when someone's been in my office. He held out his hand. The drive. Now. I reluctantly placed it in his palm. What's on it? Everything. Financial records, government secrets, the real names and locations of every Russian sleeper agent currently operating in North America. He pocketed the drive. It's worth approximately $50 million to the right buyer, and it's the reason your grandmother is dead. We made it to my car as sirens wailed in the distance. Victor slumped in the passenger seat, blood seeping through his shirt, but his eyes remained alert and focused. Drive to the industrial district, he instructed. Old textile factory on Maple Street. How do you know where Mom is? Because I know who took her. Dmitry Volkov's younger brother, Alexei. He's been hunting me for 5 years, picking off my old associates one by one. The list Grandma Rose had, those were all your people? Former colleagues, yes. People who knew about the money I stole, the identities I compromised. Alexei has been systematically eliminating everyone connected to my betrayal. Victor pressed his hand against his wounded shoulder. Rose died because she got too close to discovering the pattern. Alexei couldn't risk her contacting American authorities. We drove through empty streets, my mind reeling with questions. Why didn't you just give him what he wanted years ago? Because what he wants isn't just the money or the information. He wants me to suffer the way his brother suffered. Victor's voice was hollow. Dmitry was my partner for 8 years, my best friend. When I disappeared with the stolen files, the FSB assumed he was involved. They tortured him for information he didn't have, then killed his wife and daughter before finally putting him out of his misery. Jesus. I destroyed an innocent family to save myself. Alexei has spent the last decade making sure I understand that pain. Victor pointed to a dark building ahead. There, 3rd floor. They'll have her in the old supervisor's office. It's the only room with no windows. I parked behind a pile of rusted machinery. Victor checked his gun and winced as the movement pulled at his shoulder wound. Listen carefully, he said. Alexei will try to trade your mother for the USB drive. He'll promise to let us all go if I give him what he wants. He's lying. How do you know? Because that's what I would do. Victor met my eyes. He's going to kill all 3 of us regardless. The only question is how much we suffer first. We entered the factory through a broken window. The building smelled of rust and decay, moonlight filtering through holes in the roof. Victor moved like a ghost through the shadows, every step calculated and silent. On the 3rd floor, we could hear voices speaking Russian. Angry, urgent conversation that echoed through the empty space. Victor held up his hand, signaling me to stop. They're arguing about something, he whispered. Your mother must have said something to upset them. We crept closer until we could see into the supervisor's office. My mother was tied to a chair in the center of the room, her face bruised, but her eyes defiant. 3 men surrounded her, and I recognized the leader from news photos I'd seen online. Alexei Volkov, wanted by Interpol for multiple murders. Your husband is not the man you married, Alexei was saying in heavily accented English. He is killer, thief, destroyer of families. Everything you have built together is lie. I don't care what he used to be, my mother replied, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. He's been a good husband and father for 23 years. That's all that matters to me. Alexei backhanded her across the face. You care when you see what he has done. When you see photographs of children he murdered, families he destroyed for money. Victor tensed beside me, his finger moving to his gun's trigger. He's showing her the file, Victor whispered. Photos from my old missions, evidence of things I did before I came to America. Through the doorway, I could see Alexei pulling photographs from a folder and holding them in front of my mother's face. Her expression changed from defiance to horror as she saw whatever was in those pictures. Now you understand, Alexei said. The man you love is monster. The father your daughter worships is killer of innocent people. My mother looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. What do you want from us? I want Victor to face truth about himself. I want him to choose between the family he loves and the crimes he committed. Alexei smiled coldly. I want him to suffer way my brother suffered. And if he gives you what you want, then I kill you quickly instead of slowly. Victor stood up, his gun trained on the doorway. I think I've heard enough, but as he stepped into view, I saw something that made my blood freeze. 2 more men were positioned behind pillars on either side of the room, their weapons already aimed at Victor's position. It was a trap, and my father had just walked directly into it. Drop the weapon, Victor, Alexei commanded, his own gun now pressed against my mother's temple. You are outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Again. Victor lowered his pistol but didn't drop it. Hello, Alexei. You look well for a dead man. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, as they say in American movies. Alexei smiled without warmth, though same cannot be said for your old friends. Did you enjoy watching news reports of their unfortunate accidents? You killed them all. I eliminated security risks, just as you taught me, brother. Alexei's grip tightened on his weapon. Drop gun now, or Elizabeth dies in 3 seconds. Victor placed his pistol on the floor and kicked it away. Immediately, the 2 hidden gunmen emerged from their positions, keeping their weapons trained on him. Excellent. Now where is lovely Addison? Surely you did not come here alone to rescue your bride. I pressed myself deeper into the shadows outside the office, barely breathing. Victor's eyes flicked toward my hiding spot for just an instant. She's safe, he lied. Far away from here. I think not. Alexei gestured to one of his men. Pavel, search building. Little princess must be here somewhere. As Pavel moved toward the door, Victor stepped forward slightly, drawing Alexei's attention. You want to know about the money I stole? The files I took? I'll tell you everything, but only if you let them go. You are in no position to make bargains. Alexei pulled out a thick folder and scattered photographs across the floor in front of my mother. But first, your wife should see exactly who she married. From my hiding place, I could see some of the photos. Crime scenes, bodies, a younger Victor in military fatiguage standing over corpses that included women and children. My mother's face went pale. Thomas? His name is Viktor Kozlov, Alexei announced. These pictures are from Chechnya, 1997. Your husband was part of special unit that eliminated entire villages suspected of harboring rebels. That's not true, my mother whispered, but her voice carried no conviction. Tell her, Victor, Alexei commanded. Tell your wife about Grozny massacre. Tell her about the families you murdered for Russian government. Victor looked at my mother with something like relief, as if he'd been carrying this burden for decades. It's true, Elizabeth. I killed those people. I killed hundreds of people over 8 years of service to the FSB. Including children? Including children. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. My mother stared at the man she'd married, the father of her child, and I could see her entire world crumbling. But that's not the worst part, Victor continued, his voice growing stronger. The worst part is that I volunteered for those missions. I was good at killing, and I enjoyed it. Alexei laughed. Finally, some honesty. Tell her about David Martinez, the young man whose life you stole. I killed David because he was FSB, sent to spy on Elizabeth and her family. But I also killed him because I wanted his life. Victor met my mother's horrified gaze. I wanted you, Elizabeth. I wanted the normal existence you represented. So I murdered the father of your child and made you love me instead. I had to bite my hand to keep from crying out. Even knowing some of this already, hearing him confess it so coldly was devastating. You drugged me, my mother said. Made me forget. Yes, the drugs erased your memories of working with David, of the espionage activities you'd been involved in. I let you remember him as just a boyfriend who died tragically. What about Rose? Her voice was barely audible. Did you kill my mother too? No, but I would have, if Alexei hadn't done it first. Victor's confession came without emotion. Rose was getting too close to the truth. She was a threat to the life I'd built with you. Alexei was clearly enjoying the destruction of my father's family. And now, the final revelation. Victor, tell your wife why you really chose her over other targets. Victor hesitated for the first time. Alexei, tell her, or I will. My father closed his eyes. Because your father worked for the State Department. Because marrying his daughter gave me access to classified information I could sell to the highest bidder. Because every document he brought home, every conversation he had at the dinner table, every detail about American intelligence operations, all of it was valuable to foreign governments. My mother's face went completely white. You've been using me to spy on my father for 23 years? In the beginning, yes. But Elizabeth, everything else. My love for you, for Addison, the life we built together, that became real. Nothing about you is real, she screamed, struggling against her bonds. You're a monster. You killed my daughter's father. You've been using my family for intelligence. You murdered children. Alexei struck her again, harder this time. Enough sentiment. Where is USB drive, Victor? My father reached into his pocket and pulled out the thumb drive I'd found. Here, everything you want is on this device. Bank account numbers, agent identities, government secrets worth $50 million on the black market. And your daughter? Where is precious Addison? I told you. You told me lies. Alexei nodded to Pavel, who had returned from his search empty-handed. But no matter. We will find her after we finish with you. Alexei took the USB drive and pocketed it. Then he pulled out a syringe filled with clear liquid. This is what we used on your grandmother, he said. Causes heart failure within minutes. Leaves no trace in normal autopsy. Very clean. Very professional. He grabbed my mother's arm. Your wife dies first while you watch. Then we find your daughter and do same to her. You will live just long enough to understand pain you caused my family. Wait, Victor said desperately. There's something else. Something more valuable than what's on that drive. Alexei paused with the syringe inches from my mother's arm. What? The real location of the FSB slush fund. $12 billion in untraceable accounts that I helped establish in the 1990s. It's not on the drive because I never wrote it down anywhere. You lie. Search the drive yourself. You'll find $50 million in stolen money and enough intelligence to keep you comfortable for life. But $12 billion? That's generational wealth, Alexei. Enough to buy and sell governments. I could see the greed warring with vengeance in Alexei's eyes. $12 billion was a fortune beyond imagination. Where? Alexei demanded. Victor smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. Kill my family, and you'll never find out. Let them go, and I'll give you account numbers that will make you richer than Putin himself. It was a brilliant gambit, but I could see it wouldn't work. Alexei was too committed to his revenge to be bought off, even by billions. Nice try, Alexei said, raising the syringe again. But I would rather watch you suffer than be richest man in world. That's when I made my decision. I couldn't let my mother die, even knowing everything I now knew about the monster who'd raised me. I stepped into the doorway, hands raised in surrender. Let her go, I said. I'm here. You have all of us now. Ah, the princess arrives, Alexei said, swinging his gun toward me while keeping the syringe pressed against my mother's neck. Come in, little one. Time for family reunion. I stepped into the room, my heart hammering as I saw the full scope of what my father had become. The photographs scattered across the floor showed scenes of unimaginable violence, mass graves, burning buildings, families executed in their homes, and in several of the images, a younger Viktor Kozlov stood among the carnage without a trace of remorse. Addison, get out of here, my mother pleaded, but her voice lacked conviction. I could see in her eyes that something fundamental had broken when she learned the truth about her husband. No one leaves, Alexei declared. Now we have complete family. We can begin proper farewell. He gestured to one of his men. Boris, restrain the girl. As Boris moved toward me, Victor suddenly lurched forward. If you hurt her, you'll what? Alexei laughed. Kill me? You are tied and outnumbered. Your threats carry no weight here. But Victor wasn't looking at Alexei anymore. His eyes were fixed on something behind me, and I caught the faintest hint of a smile. I'm not the one you should be worried about, he said quietly. The lights went out. In the darkness, everything happened at once. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, muzzle flashes strobing like deadly lightning. I threw myself to the floor as bullets whined overhead, the sound of automatic weapons echoing through the factory. FBI! Drop your weapons! The shout came from the stairwell, followed by the thunder of boots as tactical teams poured into the building. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in a hellish red glow. Boris was down, a pool of blood spreading beneath him. Pavel was firing wildly at shadows while backing toward a broken window. And Alexei still had the syringe pressed against my mother's throat, but now federal agents had him surrounded. Let her go! The FBI team leader had his rifle trained on Alexei's head. You're outnumbered 20-1. American dogs, Alexei snarled in accented English. You think this ends here? There are others who will finish what I started. Victor was pressed against the wall, his hands raised, but his eyes never left my mother. Alexei, this is over. Let Elizabeth go and surrender. You can still make a deal. Deal? Alexei's laugh was bitter. You think I care about deals? My entire family is dead because of you, Victor. My brother, his wife, their children. All murdered because you could not accept consequences of your betrayal. Your brother was a killer, same as me, Victor replied. Don't pretend this is about justice. This is about balance, Alexei screamed. You took family from me, I take family from you. He pressed the syringe's needle against my mother's skin, and I saw her wince as it broke the surface. Mom? I started to move toward her, but Victor grabbed my arm. Don't, he said quietly. Stay back. The FBI team leader was speaking into his radio, calling for a negotiator, but I could see this situation was beyond negotiation. Alexei had the look of a man with nothing left to lose. You want to know truth about your precious father? Alexei called out to me. Ask him about the real reason Rose had to die. Alexei, don't... Victor started. She discovered that Victor has been selling American intelligence to foreign governments for 23 years, Alexei continued, pressing the syringe deeper. Every classified document your grandfather brought home, every state secret your grandmother heard at the hospital, every piece of information your family had access to. Victor sold it all. The words hit me like physical blows. That's not true. Show her the bank accounts, FBI agents, Alexei taunted. Show her the $200 million her father has earned by betraying American secrets. The team leader glanced at Victor, who had gone very still. Is that accurate, Mr. Kozlov? Some of it, Victor admitted quietly. I sold information to stay hidden, to maintain my cover, but You never what? My mother interrupted, her voice hollow with despair. Never destroyed lives? Never betrayed your adopted country? Never used your own family as intelligence assets? Victor met her eyes across the room. I never stopped loving you, either of you. Everything I did was to protect the life we built together. By selling secrets that got American agents killed? The FBI team leader's voice was hard as steel. We've been tracking money transfers from your accounts to known terrorist organizations for the past 5 years, Kozlov. How many attacks did you help finance? I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Alexei corrected. Just like you did not want to know that your information led to bombing in Moscow subway that killed 43 people. Just like you did not want to know that Syrian chemical weapons attack was funded with money you helped launder. The room spun around me. My father, the man who'd coached my soccer team, who'd read me bedtime stories, who'd taught me to drive, had blood on his hands from terrorist attacks around the world. How many people have died because of you? I whispered. Victor looked at me with infinite sadness. I stopped counting years ago, Sunshine. But if I had to guess, thousands. Jesus Christ. The team leader shook his head in disgust. Alexei Volkov, you're under arrest for multiple murders. Release the hostage now. I think not. Alexei's finger moved to the syringe's plunger. But I will make you bargain. Give me Victor Kozlov. Let me finish what I came here to do, and I will surrender peacefully. That's not how this works. Then watch Elizabeth Morrison die the same way her mother did. Alexei's eyes found mine. Did your father tell you he was there when Rose died? That he held pillow over her face while heart poison did its work? Victor's face went white. That's not... I tried to save her. You helped me kill her, Alexei screamed. You told me exactly when she would be alone, exactly how to get into house, exactly which room she slept in. The confession hung in the air like a death sentence. My father hadn't just failed to protect my grandmother, he'd helped murder her. Why? My voice broke on the word. Victor's shoulders sagged. Because she was going to expose everything. The FBI would have arrested me, deported you and your mother, destroyed the only real thing I'd ever had in my life. So you killed her. I hoped, maybe Alexei would be satisfied with just Rose. Maybe he'd leave the rest of you alone. Victor's voice was barely audible. I was wrong. Alexei laughed triumphantly. Finally, truth. Your beloved father chose his own skin over woman who raised his wife like daughter. He is monster, Addison. Monster who deserves to die. He started to depress the syringe's plunger. That's when my mother did something that shocked everyone in the room. She bit down hard on Alexei's wrist, her teeth sinking deep into flesh. He screamed and jerked backward, the syringe flying across the room. Now, the FBI team leader shouted. Gunfire erupted again, but this time it was over in seconds. Alexei Volkov crumpled to the floor, his chest riddled with bullets. My mother collapsed in her chair, sobbing with relief and revulsion. And Victor Kozlov, Thomas Morrison, the man who'd been my father for 23 years, was handcuffed and led away by federal agents. As they dragged him past me, he stopped and looked back one last time. I'm sorry, Sunshine, he whispered, for all of it, but I want you to know, loving you and your mother was the only real thing I ever did. Then he was gone, and I was left staring at the photographs of his victims scattered across the floor, trying to reconcile the monster in those images with the man who'd taught me to ride a bike. 6 months later, I sat in a small coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, watching rain streak down the windows while I waited for my mother to arrive. We'd both moved here after the FBI finished with us. New names, new lives, a witness protection program for the families of traitors. The newspapers had called it the biggest espionage case in decades. Victor Kozlov, the Russian deep-cover agent who'd operated undetected in America for 24 years, selling state secrets and financing terrorist operations while masquerading as a suburban father. The story had everything: international intrigue, family betrayal, and a body count that stretched across 3 continents. What the newspapers didn't capture was the quieter devastation, the way my mother aged 10 years in the weeks following Victor's arrest, or how I still woke up some mornings expecting to hear him making coffee downstairs. They didn't write about the therapy sessions where we tried to separate the loving father we remembered from the monster we'd discovered, or the way we both flinched when strangers approached us in public. Mom arrived at exactly 3 p.m., as punctual as ever. She looked better than she had in months. Her color was back, and she'd started wearing makeup again. The haunted look was fading from her eyes, replaced by something that might eventually become peace. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" she asked, settling into the chair across from me. "Better. The nightmares are less frequent." I gestured to the laptop open on the table between us. "I've been writing about everything that happened. My therapist thinks it might help." "Have you heard from David Chen?" she asked, referring to Grandma Rose's lawyer who'd become our unofficial guardian through the legal proceedings. "He called yesterday. Victor," I still couldn't bring myself to call him Dad, even in my thoughts. "He's been cooperating with federal authorities. They've recovered most of the money, identified the terrorist cells he was funding, and arrested several other Russian assets." "What does that mean for his sentence?" "Life in prison instead of execution. If he keeps talking, they might move him to a minimum security facility in 20 years. We sat in silence for a while, watching people hurry past the window with umbrellas and newspapers held over their heads. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware that their safety depended on catching monsters like the man who'd raised me. "I got a letter from him," I said finally. Mom's cup paused halfway to her lips. "What did it say?" I pulled the envelope from my purse. The return address was ADX Florence, the Supermax prison where they kept the worst terrorists and spies. "Do you want me to read it?" She nodded. "My dearest Addison," I began, recognizing his careful handwriting. "I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you never respond to this letter. But I wanted you to know that every day in this place, I think about the man I was when I was your father, and I choose to remember that version of myself instead of the monster I was before I met your mother." I paused, watching Mom wipe tears from her eyes. "The prosecutors have asked me to testify about other Russian operations in America. Each time I cooperate, I think about whether you would be proud of me for finally doing the right thing, even though it comes too late to matter." "Does he ask about me?" Mom whispered. I skipped ahead to the relevant passage. "Please tell your mother that I know she can never forgive me, and I'm not asking her to try. But I want her to know that loving her was the only authentic thing I ever did in 45 years of life. If there's a heaven and hell, I'll go to my punishment knowing I experienced both." Mom was crying openly now. Despite everything, the murders, the betrayals, the lies, part of her still loved the man who'd been her husband for over 2 decades. "There's more," I continued. "I've established a trust fund for you using money the FBI recovered from my accounts. It should be enough for college, graduate school, and a good start in whatever career you choose. I know blood money can't buy forgiveness, but maybe it can buy you the freedom to build a life I never contaminated." I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. He signs it, "With love and regret, the man who was briefly your father." We finished our coffee in contemplative silence. Outside, the rain was letting up, and patches of blue sky were visible between the clouds. "What did you decide about college?" Mom asked eventually. "International relations, with a focus on counterintelligence." I managed a small smile. Turns out growing up with a Russian spy gave me unique insights into how these operations work. "The FBI recruiter was serious about offering you a job after graduation. Dead serious. Apparently my first-hand experience with deep cover assets makes me valuable." I closed my laptop and packed it away. I figure if I can't undo the damage Victor caused, maybe I can prevent other families from going through what we did. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. "He would be proud of you, you know. The father you remember, Thomas Morrison, would be proud that you're turning this nightmare into something positive. Would he? Sometimes I wonder if that man ever really existed, or if it was all just an elaborate performance." "I've been thinking about that too," she said, "and I've decided it doesn't matter. The love I felt from him was real, even if he was pretending. The father you remember, the one who taught you to drive and came to every soccer game, that person existed in those moments, even if he was built on lies." As we walked back to our cars, I thought about the USB drive that had started everything. The FBI had found exactly what Victor promised: 50 million in stolen funds, and enough classified information to compromise dozens of ongoing operations. But they'd also found something else. Years of digital photographs showing Victor at my school events, family vacations, and quiet moments at home. Pictures of a man who looked genuinely happy, in a way that seemed incompatible with his history of violence. Maybe that was the most disturbing truth of all, that monsters could love, that killers could be devoted fathers, that the capacity for evil didn't preclude the capacity for authentic human connection. 6 months ago, I'd thought I understood the difference between good and evil, between truth and lies, between the people who protected you and the people who destroyed you. Now I knew that sometimes they were the same person, but I also knew something else. I was Elizabeth Morrison's daughter, raised by a grandmother who died trying to protect me from a truth that could have killed me. I was stronger than the lies that had shaped my childhood, and I was determined to build something honest from the wreckage of my family's deception. As I drove home through the clearing rain, I thought about the letter I'd write back to the man in the Supermax prison. It would be short, maybe just a few lines. The father I remember taught me that family means protecting the people you love. You failed at that, but I won't. I'm going to spend my life making sure other families don't have to suffer what ours did. In a strange way, that makes me more your daughter than you probably intended. I wouldn't sign it with love, but I might sign it with forgiveness. After all, even monsters deserve the chance to be remembered for the good they'd done, however briefly, in between all the darkness.